ladies and gentlemen, Gary Moore.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Hi. Hey, Bill Wendell. Evening, friends. Thank you and welcome to Tell the Truth. Those of you who are followers of the New York Mets, and I assume that is all of mankind, will be very familiar with the dazzling work of our leadoff guest. And those of you who saw the New York Mets in the 1973 World Series with the Oakland A's saw his dazzling work as well. We'll have to wait to find out who he is while we meet our home run panel here on To Tell the Truth. Bill Cullen.
Bill Cullen. Peggy Cass. Host of Beat the Clock, Gene Wood. And Kitty Carlisle.
You look green today.
I love it for me.
Well, may I say that I am comforted as always by the presence of our indefatigable regulars, Carlisle, Cass, and Cullen, and cheered by a guest who I've known for many happy years, Mr. Gene Wood, the host of Beat the Clock. Gene?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Gene, you never played this game before.
No, this is my first time, Gary.
Well, it's very, very simple. After each question, what happens is you break a balloon, and your chair collapses, the panel all change clothes, and you got 20 seconds in which to do it, okay?
Yeah. Well, I know how to play the game. I've been married for 9 years. It's,
And you've learned about to tell the truth. You
Right.
better ahead. I'm going to address our first question to our sportsnicks, which is Peggy and Bill. When I say that the man that you're going to meet next is a denizen of Shea Stadium, and that he is not a hitting man, he is not a throwing man, and he is not a catching man, but he is rather a celebrated sign man. To whom am I referring? Would you know?
Yeah.
You don't know his name.
I don't know his name.
Well, all right, his position.
He's an agency man. He has a sign for every... Oh, no, he sits in the stands.
Yeah.
And when somebody
That's right.
hits a hit-
It's Karl Ehrhardt, the inventive man who held
Yeah.
up all of those signs
Beautiful
during the
signs.
the Mets
Right.
games. As a matter of fact, his signs captured the imagination of John Lindsay. Here's a copy of the New York Daily News with John Lindsay
remember that.
holding up a sign inspired by relief pitcher Tug McGraw's affirmation of faith, in which he said, "You gotta believe."
I don't like the headline too much.
All right, now let's have Mr. Ehrhardt enter and, excuse me, sign in, please.
Number one, what is your name, please?
My name is Karl Ehrhardt.
Number two.
My name is Karl Ehrhardt.
Number three.
My name is Karl Ehrhardt.
And obviously, panel, in the film clips, we had his face blacked out so that you couldn't identify him. Our job now is to find out which one is indeed Karl Ehrhardt, and here is his sign-making scenario. He says, "I, Karl Ehrhardt, am known as the sign man of Shea Stadium. From my third base box seat at many New York Met ball games, I flash a rich variety of signs that are either directed at specific ball players or that make a comment on the preceding play. I bring about 70 different homemade signs to each game. Surprisingly, the one saying 'you're a star' is always used in an unflattering way after a player makes an error. 'Louder' is usually flashed to work up the crowd in support of a Met rally. Perhaps my most famous sign was 'you're fired.' I first used it after the president of the Oakland A's fired his second baseman in the 73 World Series. I had the sign ready for the next Oakland player who were to bobble a ball. My amusing and provocative signs have caught the fancy of the crowd, the television announcers, and the management of the Mets. But it was not always that way. When I displayed one of my very first signs, several Met employees rushed over and tore it all to pieces. Signed, Karl Ehrhardt." you remember the setup, friends. We have across the way 3 chaps, all of who claim to be Karl Ehrhardt, the sign man of Shea Stadium, who displays homemade signs at many New York Mets baseball games. And let's start with a gal who's nice to have around in the squeeze play, Miss Peggy Cass.
Thank you. Yeah. Listen, my dear, now, I really think that whoever you are, you're sensational. But number 3, did you used to have a mustache?
Never.
Oh, okay. Just a dirty screen, I guess. Number 2, who prints your signs? Because the printing is really good.
I make them myself at home, yeah.
What does your wife think of all this?
Oh, she's a baseball fan, too, so she loves it, yeah.
Yeah, but like, number 1, does she ever get dinner on the table? Or is your sign always there, getting painted?
Well, she has to call me quite a bit.
I see now. Number 3, what's your sign that you hold up for Bud Harrelson? What does it say?
When you've said Bud, you've said it all.
And number 1, you sit on the third base side, so number 1, who's the third base coach of the Mets?
Eddie Yost.
Thank you. Number 2, are you from Queens? You've got such fervor for the Mets. I feel you must be from Queens.
Of course.
Okay. Now, oh, nuts. I
Oh,
finally know
Peggy.
something.
Hey, good questions. Let's go to Gene Wood.
Thank you, Gary. We're going to start with you, number 1. What do you do for a living, or is this your living?
I'm in merchandising. No, I have to work for a living.
You have to work for a living.
Yes, sir.
And you're in merchandising, all right? Let us go now to number 3. I want to ask you, when you've held up these signs at any point in your sign career, has an angry ball player ever threatened you or started to come after you?
Well, they've become angry with me. No one ever came after me, but there have been a few who've become angry with the signs.
And number 3 again, what did they say to you?
They didn't say anything. They made signs of their own.
And Kitty, if you dare ask what the signs were.
I would like to pursue that order of questioning of
afraid
Mr.
of that.
Woods.
Yes.
I would like to know if they made verbal signs. Did they say anything, or did they make signs with their hands?
Which
Number
number?
3, I'm pursuing it.
Signs with the hands. Yeah.
Oh, then we will draw a veil, yes. Number 1, no, number 2, what do you do for a living?
I'm in merchandising
Oh,
myself.
you all 3
yes.
are in merchandising, obviously, yes. And number 1, how did you get this idea first? Did it start with little tiny signs and then get to bigger signs, or did you start right away as a star?
Well, I started as a star. In 1965, decided to make a real big sign when Shea opened up, and that was Welcome to Grant's Tomb. So we went real big on that.
Number 2, when did you...
Thank you, Kitty. Let's go down to Bill Cullen.
I remember those signs through the year. Number 2, there was another Met fan who used to be a cheerleader, always wore a yellow raincoat no matter the weather. Who was that?
That was Dr. Dominic Principato, I believe.
Number 1, what was Dr. Principato's specialty?
Can't recall.
Interesting to mention, in those years of the Mets, he was an anesthesiologist, if I recall, number 1. And it worked out. Number 3, what was the name of the dog the Mets had their very first couple of years when they moved into town? They had a little dog that appeared on all their shows. Do you remember his name?
Slider's the only one I can think of.
Number 2, do they make you pay to get in after all these years of faithfulness that you've showed?
Oh, yes.
They really do. Donald Grant, the general manager of the Mets, who won't allow other teams to play in there and who takes every available buck, he makes you pay. Is that right?
He does, but...
Let's give a boo for Mr. Grant there. Boo.
I've been waiting to do that for years.
Well, I'm not going to get in there anymore.
Well, we heard the bell under the boo, and when we hear the bell at any time, it means that we must mark our ballots, friends. And we must mark them, of course, for number 1, or for number 2, or for number 3.
Today,
scale of our business.
Ground rules are that we pay $50 for each wrong vote. We paid the group $500 if nobody comes up with the real Carl. And Peggy starts, please.
I wonder if you get free... I love that sign. I voted for number 3 because I love that sign. When you've said Bud, you've said it all. So I voted for you. You knew that one.
We got a 3 showing, and Gene Wood.
Well, I voted for number 3 as well. There's a very famous sign I remember which says, John Wayne takes bubble baths. And number 3 looks like that kind of a guy. He looks like he's very cool under any circumstances. And he didn't get upset when I asked him if he was threatened by a ball player. He seems used to it. So I chose 3.
Okay, we got a pair of 3 showing, and Kitty?
Well, number 3 is he's got a witty mouth, and he's been waving at the audience, and he's very expansive, and he looks like a man who's used to big crowds. But somehow, I think it's number 1. And anyway, number 1 is wearing the same yellow shirt he had on in the picture. So I'm voting for number 1.
Well, that's true. Very observant. Okay, we got 1-1 and 2 3s. Bill
They won't
Cullen.
let him do that.
Well, you know, I like number 3. He seemed to have all the answers. But by golly, number 2 knew the name of the doctor. And if he's not the right one, he did his homework. And for that reason, I voted for number 2. There you go.
On the basis of esoteric knowledge.
Yes.
All right, the votes are in. Will the real Karl Ehrhardt please stand up?
It's 2.
Very good, Karl, indeed. You are a great addition to the whole New York scene, the national scene, may I say. Number 1, what is your real name and what do you do?
My real name is John Alvanos, and I'm a national account salesman for Mead Containers.
And number 3, tell us about yourself.
My name is John Mahoney, and I buy men's jackets from Montgomery Ward.
Of course, we have no way of knowing how the panel is going to vote before the game started, being a totally ad-lib show. And but Karl, you had another sign there, but hidden behind the desk, which you were going to use. Would you show it to us, in case you know that he wasn't voted for at all, that he didn't get any votes? He had a sign back there he was going to show. You want to show it to us now? You've done it again. Karl, thanks for a million laughs and a lot of fun. And thank you, gentlemen, for being with us on Tell the Truth. Take care. Now let's say hello to our next guest.
Number 1, what is your name, please?
My name is Vernon Johnson, and I am an alcoholic.
Number 2.
My name is Vernon Johnson, and I'm an alcoholic.
Number 3.
My name is Vernon Johnson, and I'm an alcoholic.
Only one of them truly is Vernon Johnson. Only one of them is an alcoholic. And here is Vernon Johnson's story. It says, I, Vernon Johnson, am a founder of the Johnson Institute for the Treatment of Alcoholism. 1 out of 10 so-called social drinkers in this country eventually become alcoholics. And there is no such thing as an ex-alcoholic. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Alcoholism is a chronic disease. It cannot be cured, but it can be arrested. From social drinking, the alcoholic passes into an increasingly self-destructive state, overpowered by mental mismanagement, feelings of guilt and shame, unable to help himself. However, the alcoholic can be rehabilitated, helped back to a full and productive life. What is needed is knowledgeable intervention from the outside to guide him to an understanding of his disease and his own nature as an individual. I have written a practical guide to treatment of alcoholism in a book entitled I'll Quit Tomorrow, signed Vernon Johnson. That's a great title for a book, I'll Quit Tomorrow. Why don't we start the questioning, please, with Bill Cullen?
Number 1, I've always been interested in the difference between an alcoholic and a, what is the word, a lush, and I mean that advisedly. For instance, how about a person, number 1, who can wake up in the morning reasonably sober with a hangover, drink through the day and get terribly drunk before nighttime, but can then sleep it off and go back to work the next morning, and he does that constantly. Is a person like that an alcoholic?
Yes, he is.
The fact, number 3, isn't there supposed to be a difference there where an alcoholic is a person who cannot perform his regular duties or something like that?
Not at all. An alcoholic is one who drinks excessively.
Number 2, what institution, what hospital in New York has an alcoholic ward? What hospital was the pioneer in having a ward for members of Alcoholics Anonymous, actually?
I'm not sure the pioneer. The current one is Roosevelt.
Thank you, Bill. We'll go to Peggy Cass.
Number 3, how does one, you say alcoholism is a chronic disease. Well, how do you catch it? I mean, how does one get to be an alcoholic?
This is one of the great mysteries, but there's no question about the fact that a social drinker, like 10% of social drinkers become alcoholics.
Okay, now number 2, can you give, say for instance on children, you know, they give them all kinds of psychological tests. Could you predict, you know, from psychological tests before people start to drink whether they've got a chance of becoming an alcoholic?
No.
Okay. Now, number 1, what do you mean by mental mismanagement?
Well, we mean that people who are alcoholic cannot manage their own affairs properly. That's where the problem comes in, when they become an alcoholic.
Well, you know, the thing is, number 1, once you're drunk, you can't manage your affairs. But even alcoholics are sober lots of the time. Can't they do it then?
Yes, they can, but you set in the rationalization sets in, and you won't admit it. You don't even admit it to yourself.
Thank you. Number 2, how much does alcoholism cost?
Oh, boy, Peg, good question, but we're going to have to go on to Gene Wood.
Thank you, Gary. Number 2, I'd like to address my first question to you. I had a member of my family who was an alcoholic, and it's a terribly difficult thing. The point I want to ask you is, where does the process go? How does one become an alcoholic in terms of physiology? When drinking alcohol, what happens to the system?
Well, actually, all the vital organs of the body are involved in alcoholism, and one or another, sooner or later, breaks down. However, what we pay more attention to than the physical addiction is the psychological addiction.
Thank you. Number 3, I would like to ask you, there's a byproduct of excessive drinking, and it's an element that's very common in everyday use. Do you know what that is? As a result of drinking, in the bloodstream, what happens?
Well, there's a chemical called acetaldehyde that's formed.
I see. Number 1.
All right, Gene, thank you. We go to Kitty.
Thank you. Number 2, is there a chemical predisposition to alcoholism in the body?
A great many studies have been undertaken to try to prove this. As yet, there is no study that
Thank you.
clinically proves it.
Thank you. Number 1, we learn a lot on this show. It's really continuing adult education. We had a fellow on who was doing a study for the government, and he told us about the one animal who will willingly drink alcohol that they can study for alcoholism. Do you know what that animal is?
The pig.
Oh, that's right.
You thought you had him.
I sure did. Number 3, can you become an alcoholic on wine?
Yes, you can.
How much do you have to drink?
Excessively.
And what does that mean, excessively?
It means more than you've decided to drink.
Ah, is that the criterion?
Yes.
I'm safe.
We just got a little bell that went off there on a very good note, as a matter of fact. And the bell tells us that we have to mark our ballots, and that's a good team over there. It's going to be hard to guess whether it's number 1 or whether it's number 2 or whether it's number 3. Bill Cullen seems to have made up his mind. So, Bill, if you'll show us your ballot and...
They're all marvelous, and the work they do is marvelous, and I agree with everything. I voted for number 1 for several reasons. One, he was so pleased when Kitty gave him an opportunity to recognize the pig, and I just like. And anyway, I voted for him. He started everything with we.
Any friend of a pig is a friend of yours.
Exactly. I wouldn't touch that.
So we got a one show in there, Henry.
You said it, I didn't.
And we go, please, to...
Well, moving quickly along, I voted for 1.
Right. All right, we got a pair of ones going in Gene Wood.
I voted for number 3. And the reason I voted for it is when I asked him that question about the chemical ingredients in the bloodstream, he came up with a marvelous answer. The only thing is, I don't know whether it's right or not, but it sounded good.
Sounded good to me.
That's why I bought it.
Pair of 1s and a 3. And Kitty, what do you want to do?
I voted for number 2 because I've never known an ex-alcoholic that didn't look very happy and very jolly. And number 2 looks very jolly.
Well, now we have a situation where it's all the way across the board. Number 1 has a plurality, but we'll find out. The votes are in. Will the real Vernon Johnson please stand up? Well, Kitty, now... Yeah, Kitty picked the right guy and for the right reasons. Let's go down and find out who our very successful imposters were. Number 1, what is your real name, please, and what do you do?
My name is J. Walter Anderson. I'm a colorologist. I interpret your personality by your favorite colors.
Hey there. And number 3, want to tell us about yourself?
Well, my name is Henry Weddingfeld, and I market industrial chemicals.
Dr. Johnson, isn't part of the problem in preventing alcoholism is that you can never persuade the alcoholic, the incipient alcoholic, that he is in danger until it's too late?
That's exactly the problem, and simply because the rational procedures of getting into the problem are such that he becomes deluded by the procedure itself. He's a victim of his own rationalizations.
The important thing about this book is that it is as valuable to the people who are involved with alcoholics, the people around alcoholics, as it is to the alcoholic himself. Recommended highly. Thank you very much, Dr. Vernon Johnson and gentlemen from England. Bill Cullen, in answer to your Valentine to Mr. Grant concerning the fact that he didn't give free tickets to Mr. Ehrhardt, you'll be delighted to know that he did pay his fare to Oakland for the World Series.
But not back.
Yeah.
This is Bill Wendell speaking for To Tell the Truth, a Mark Goodson, Bill Cullen production.